G'day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode of the Big Bad Brad Show MMA edition. My name is Brad Williams, and every week I aim to provide you with a fan's eye view of the sport of mixed martial arts from way up the back in the cheap seats. I say it every single week, but I really do appreciate you checking out the podcast. You can find us at facebook.com/Big Bad Brad MMA. You can find me on Twitter at Big Bad Brad MMA, and you can also find me on YouTube. Just search Big Bad Brad Show MMA, and you'll be able to find us. No dramas at all. We do kick things off this week with some sad news, and of course everyone would have heard about it by now, and that is the passing of Kimbo Slice. Just 42 years old, apparently passed away as a result of heart failure. I won't go into it too much because by now you've probably seen it and read it everywhere, but there's no denying the impact that Kimbo had on the sport of mixed martial arts. For me, I think Kimbo's appeal was that he was someone that was relatable. He wasn't a kickboxing world champion. He wasn't a jiu-jitsu black belt. He was just a dude. He was just a dude that liked to fight, and people loved to watch normal people fight. And Kimbo was just must-see TV every time he was in the cage. You got to look no further than his fight with James Thompson in Elite XC. I believe it was back in 2008. That fight had 7 million viewers. It's still to this day the most watched MMA fight in North America. It got more of an audience tuned in to watch Kimbo Slice fight James Thompson than they did to watch Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos on the first ever UFC on Fox card. So it gives you some idea of how just immensely popular Kimbo Slice was. Because he was able to achieve something that not even some world champions are able to achieve. Kimbo might not have been a world champion himself, but people wanted to watch him fight. And there's world-class MMA fighters that have been unable to achieve that. He was special. He was just someone that transcended the sport of MMA. Everybody knew who Kimbo Slice was. And more than anything, Kimbo will be remembered. And, we should all be so lucky. So, Kimbo Slice dead at the age of 42. So we move on now this week to some breaking news this morning. And Fedor Emelianenko has picked up a win over Fabio Maldonado by majority decision in St. Petersburg, Russia. A lot of controversy coming out of this fight. Fedor was absolutely cooked in the first round. Maldonado was all over him like a rash. Fedor bounced back in the second round and also won the third round. But the consensus across the board was that it was a draw. It was almost certainly a 10-8 round in the first round, and then Fedor picked up the next two. Sadly, only one of the three judges agreed, and Fedor picked up a majority decision with two judges scoring at 29-28, and the third judge 28-28, a draw. The big question now is whether or not the UFC is going to scoop up Fedor coming off the back of that performance. All the buzz leading into this fight was that Fedor, it was pretty much as close as it has ever been to Fedor signing with the UFC. The UFC really rolled out the promotion for this fight. I know it's in their best interest to attract people to Fight Pass, which was the platform that people could watch this fight on. But I can't remember in recent memory a time when the UFC has gone so far in promoting a fight on Fight Pass, especially a fight that featured a non-UFC fighter. So all the buzz was, Fedor's going to get this fight with Fabio Maldonado out of the way, and then we'll finally see him in the octagon. But is the UFC going to be so quick to pounce on him coming off such a close win and such a controversial win over a guy that the UFC just cut? My guess is yes. Fedor in the UFC equals dollars. And if it equals dollars, it doesn't have to make sense. And he's still a world-class fighter. There's no doubt in my mind. But, it is what it is. It's just gone down a few hours ago as of the recording of the podcast. Fedor Emelianenko, controversial decision victory over Fabio Maldonado. All right, so we move now to some huge fight announcements that came out this week, and there have been plenty. The first one we're going to talk about is the signing of former Bellator lightweight champion Will Brooks to the UFC. Great fighter. Definitely one to keep an eye on. He's got an 18-1 record overall. He's got 2 wins over Michael Chandler, who's tough as nails. and he steps in on short notice to take on Ross Pearson at the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale on July 9 Australian time. Definitely a big challenge for Will Brooks in his first fight in the UFC. Ross Pearson's coming off a split decision win over Chad Laprise up in Brizzy back in March, but Ross Pearson's been in there with the best in the world, so definitely a stiff challenge for Will Brooks in his first outing in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and welcome Will Brooks to the UFC. Also this week it was announced that Anthony Showtime Pettis was going to be making the move down to featherweight, coming off 3 consecutive losses at lightweight. To Rafael dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez, and most recently Edson Barboza. And we found out just a couple of days ago that he will be taking on Charles Oliveira at UFC on Fox 21, which goes down on Sunday, August 28th, Australian time. Oliveira, just the cream of the crop in the featherweight division. He's won 5 of his last 6. His only loss during that stretch was an injury loss to Max Holloway, which was in August of last year. And most recently, he's coming off a submission win over Miles Jury, which was just slick as. A great fight for Pettis in his first move down to featherweight. Charles Oliveira presents a lot of challenges. He's tall, he's rangy, and he's got unreal submissions. But Pettis is world class. I mean, he is on a 3-fight skid, which is dangerous in the UFC, but he's immensely popular, which is going to help his cause. And also, the guys he's lost to are world class. He's not out there losing to guys that he should easily, wipe the floor with. So it'll be interesting to see Anthony Pettis at featherweight. I can't wait for that. Also, we found out this week a couple of great fights announced for UFC Fight Night 92. It's happening in Salt Lake City, Utah on Sunday, August 7, Australian time. Cub Swanson, perennial featherweight contender, taking on Tatsuya Kawajiri, former Strikeforce title challenger. And also in the main event, and a huge spotlight for a couple of young guys, Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres taking on Yair Rodriguez. Rodriguez coming off that beautiful highlight reel head kick knockout of Andre Fili back at UFC 197. And Alex Caceres, I reckon, coming off the best win of his UFC career against Cole Miller on short notice at UFC 199. He looked absolutely spectacular. And I love that the UFC has given these opportunities to these young guys to main event these fight night cards. We saw it most recently with Cody Garbrandt and Thomas Almeida in a star-making performance for Cody. And I think this is also a great platform for Alex Caceres and Yair Rodriguez. So I cannot wait for that fight. And if the first couple of fight announcements are anything to go by, it should be a really, really fun card. Also, we found out just yesterday that Alexander Gustafsson will finally be making his return to the octagon at UFC Fight Night Hamburg on Sunday, September 4 against Jan Blachowicz. Gustafsson hasn't fought since he's lost to Daniel Cormier in October of last year. Jan Blachowicz coming off a win over Igor Pokrajac in Croatia in April. By the time this fight rolls around, Gustafsson will have been out for almost a year. But I truly believe that Gustafsson is the best light heavyweight fighter never to have been a world champion. He's had 2 cracks at the belt, was so close to picking it up both times. Split decision losses over John Jones and to Daniel Cormier, who we just mentioned. Especially the Jones fight really could have gone either way. And I think it's only a matter of time before we see Gustafsson in there fighting for the belt again, and I would have no dramas with that whatsoever. And now the biggest fight announcement of the last couple of weeks. I did speculate on it in the last podcast, and since then it has been made official. The Super Samoan Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar at UFC 200. Who would have thought in a million years we would ever be uttering that sentence? But it's signed, sealed, and soon to be delivered, and I cannot wait. Mark Hunt, one of the biggest knockout punchers in the history of mixed martial arts. He's on a 2-fight win streak, coming off that first-round KO of Frank Mir in March up in Brisbane. And everyone, of course, knows that Brock has been out of the game since 2011, suffered that TKO loss to Overeem at UFC 141. He's got the itch, and Mark Hunt is more than happy to scratch it for him. I think this is a very, very, just huge proportions. It's a spectacle fight. There's no titles on the line. All accounts are that it'll be a one-and-done deal for Brock. But having said that, if they do sign Fedor, I would be really, really surprised if his first fight wasn't against Brock Lesnar. And Mark Hunt just wants to keep racking up those wins and finally get another crack at the belt. One of the most interesting things since this fight was made official was the amount of people that are just shitting all over Brock Lesnar. Mate, Brock Lesnar is not to be fooled with. I know, he has a history of not particularly enjoying being punched in the face by world-class heavyweight fighters, but Brock Lesnar's wrestling is no joke. He is a world-class grappler, and he comes into this fight and relies on his wrestling. I don't know that it will be the cakewalk that a lot of people are expecting it to be for Mark Hunt. The fact of the matter is, though, Mark Hunt's only got to touch you once, and it's all over Red Rover. So I really, really think this is a much more intriguing fight than people are giving it credit for. No doubt about it, there's going to be a whole lot of eyeballs on it. The UFC 200 buy rate has almost certainly jumped up a few steps because, as I alluded to in the last podcast, you're going to get your casual fans. All those casual fans that gave up on UFC 200 when Conor McGregor was removed from the card are just going to poke their heads back in the door and go, did someone say Brock Lesnar was fighting? They know who he is. So even MMA fans, or non-MMA fans, I should say, have an interest in this fight because they want to see how this Brock Lesnar guy they've heard so much about is going to go against this guy, Mark Hunt, who can almost literally punch your head off. So I am absolutely stoked for this fight. I cannot wait. Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar, UFC 200, July 10, Australian time. You're mad if you don't check it out. We move now to some rumoured fights this week, or one rumoured fight in particular, and that is the talk that just won't go away, that Michael Bisping, the new UFC middleweight champion of the world, will be defending his title against Dan Henderson. There's been the argument that this fight doesn't really make sense, but as I said with Fedor, if it makes dollars, it doesn't have to make sense. And there's no doubt in my mind that this would be big business for the UFC and for both men involved. You've got the built-in backstory. They first fought at UFC 100 back in 2009. Dan Henderson scored one of the greatest knockouts of all time. Still, it's a fixture in every UFC highlight package. You got Hendo in that upset victory over Hector Lombard at UFC 199, Bisping knocking out Luke Rockhold to become world champion on the very same night. They have built-in history. Dan Henderson has said that win, lose or draw, if he was to get a crack at the belt against Michael Bisping, it would be his last fight. I mean, come on. This is the stuff of bloody Hollywood legend. They will make a movie about this one day. Dan Henderson, 45 years old, former two-time Pride champion, former Strikeforce champion, UFC tournament winner, and from all accounts, one of the nicest dudes in the world, taking on a guy who is already beaten, who is now the current champion, and he said that even if he becomes a world champion, it will be his last fight. UFC, please make this happen. It would be amazing. So we move now to UFC's next trip to the Octagon to be UFC Fight Night Ottawa. It's going down tomorrow as of the recording of the podcast. And it really is a really fun card. On the Fight Pass prelims, you got Smiling Sam Alvey taking on Elias Theodoro. Chris Beal, owner of one of the best flying knee knockouts ever, taking on former bantamweight title challenger Joe Soto. Christoph Jotko taking on one of my favourite fighters to watch, the Barn Cat Tamden McGrory. The UFC will be putting on their first women's flyweight fight. Joanne Calderwood taking on former strawweight title challenger Valerie Letourneau. Olivier Aubert-Mercier on the card. Steve Bosse taking on Sean O'Connell in what could be just an absolute barn burner. Two dudes just planting their feet and having a go. I think that's definitely a fight to keep an eye on. And then, of course, we move to the co-main event of the evening. Donald Cowboy Cerrone in his second welterweight fight, taking on former middleweight title challenger, the Predator Patrick Cote. Cowboy, perennial fan favourite. Just a guy that everybody loves to watch. He's won 9 of his last 10. His sole defeat in that stretch was a loss to lightweight champion of the world, Rafael dos Anjos. He's coming off a submission win over fellow Cowboy Alex Oliveira back in February, which was his UFC welterweight debut. And Cowboy is just so much fun to watch fight. Anytime he's watching, you'll drop anything and get near a TV. And if you don't, you're not a mixed martial arts fan or a fight fan, full stop. But he's taken on Patrick Cote. Tough as nails. He's won 6 of his last 7. He's currently riding a 3-fight win streak over Joe Riggs, the evergreen Josh Berkman, and most recently he picked up a win over Killer B, Ben Saunders, back in January. His only loss during that stretch was to current top contender Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who we'll get to in a minute. It's still interesting to see Cowboy at welterweight after such a long stretch at lightweight, but he definitely looks like it's not taking that toll on his body that the drop to lightweight did. But, Cote's no joke, man. He's been around a long time. He's experienced. He's got big power in his hands. But I really think that the Cowboy's probably going to be a bit too much for him in this fight. He's just world class. He really is one of the best fighters on the planet. His Muay Thai is ridiculous. He's tough as nails. He can fight you technically, or he can engage you in a brawl, and either way, he'll meet you right in the middle of the octagon. So, should be an absolute cracker of a fight. But I'm going to give Cowboy the nod in this one. I think he'll definitely walk away with the win. But I'm prepared to be wrong. I'm wrong every day. I thought Luke Rockhold was going to absolutely walk through Michael Bisping, and look how that turned out. And we move now to the main event of the evening. Rory McDonald taking on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. In the last couple of years, Wonderboy has really emerged as a genuine title challenger in the UFC welterweight division. He's 12-1 overall. His only loss during that stretch was to the tough as nails Matt Brown back in 2012. And since then, he's reeled off 6 in a row, with wins over our very own Rob Whittaker, over the aforementioned Patrick Cote, and then top contenders in Jake Ellenberger, and most recently Johnny Hendricks, with one of I think, the best performance of his MMA career back in February. It was just incredible. To come out against a former world champion and just smash him to pieces, that was insane to watch, and truly the coming out party for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But standing in his way tomorrow is Rory McDonald. His just inhuman ability to take punishment. He's coming off that fight of the year with Robbie Lawler back in July of last year. He hasn't fought since then. But with Rory McDonald, you know exactly what you're getting. Great striker, great grappling, tough as nails, that Terminator intensity. And this should be an absolute clanger. I've gone back and forth on this fight. First, I thought, Rory, with his experience and the wars he's been in, is probably going to get the nod. But then you think, well, Wonderboy he's just that flashy striker that can pull something out of nowhere. He's got that youthful enthusiasm. He's riding that 6-fight win streak. Enthusiasm and momentum in particular are a huge thing in MMA. If you're winning, you believe that you deserve to win. And you can't discount that going into such a big fight. But Rory McDonald has been in there with the best fighters in the world. So if you held a gun to my head, I'm probably going to give the nod to Rory McDonald. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Wonderboy pick up the win. Either way, I think it's going to be an absolute cracker and really a fun card, and particularly a fight night card. It's free, folks. If you're around a TV tomorrow, make sure you get there and check it out. And as soon as my laptop loads up, I'm going to let you know where and when you can watch it. Because the times change all the bloody time and the channels and all that fun stuff. And I want to make sure I give you the right information. So let's have a look here. Let's see what's going on. How's your day been anyway? You going good? No, that's taking too long. I know it is on Fox Sports 4, so check it out. UFC Fight Night Ottawa. It should be an absolute clanger, and I think we should really be in for a treat. So with that said, it brings us to the end of another episode of the Big Bad Brad Show. Once again, you can find us at facebook.com/Big Bad Brad MMA. You can find us on Twitter at Big Bad Brad MMA, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search Big Bad Brad Show MMA, and you'll be able to find the show. No dramas at all. Thank you so much again for checking it out. Enjoy the fights tomorrow, and I will catch you next time.